It was 100 degrees as we sat beneath a willow tree whose tears didn't care, they just hung in the air. Love of mine, someday you will die, but I'll be close behind. I'll follow you into the dark, no blinding light or tunnels to gates of white, just our hands clasped so tight, waiting for the hint of a spark. And if heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, then I'll follow you into the dark. In Catholic school, as vicious as Roman rule, I got my knuckles bruised by a lady in black, and I held my tongue as she told me, son, fear is the heart of love. So I never went back. And if heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied, and illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, then I'll follow you into the dark. You and me have seen everything to see, from Bangkok to Calgary, and the soles of your shoes are all worn down. The time for sleep is now, but it's nothing to cry about, 'cause we'll hold each other soon in the blackest of rooms. And if heaven and hell decide that they both are
All right, it is 1, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we get started, just doing a quick check. Can everybody hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay? I'm at a different location today, so I want to make sure that the sound sounds okay. Let me know. All right, cool. So, sounds like you can. All right, today we're going to talk about service-oriented architecture. We're going to end just a tad early today, hopefully, if we can get through this. So let's go ahead and get started. Announcements. There was a midterm on Monday. You might have noticed. Some of you noticed, and maybe some of you didn't. But if you missed that, that's a problem. You should get with me if you missed that. That's definitely a problem. But anyway, hopefully you didn't miss that. And hopefully that's not a problem for you. This week we won't have anything due this week, so it's kind of that time of semester where you've survived a lot. I've survived a lot, so we're not going to be having anything due this week. We will have a coding Friday, but that's going to be easy. But we're not going to have any project stuff due, so we'll be there to code on Friday, but we're not going to have any project stuff due this week. Okay. All right, so first off, I wanted to ask, because I like to make sure I calibrate my final. Of course, we will have a final as well. What are your thoughts on the midterm? This is anonymous. I'm never going to go back and try and figure out who said what, so just give me your unfiltered thoughts on the midterm, whether you thought it was super hard, whether you thought it was super easy, somewhere in between, whether you hated it, loved it, it stressed you out. So let me know. kind of how you thought about it. All right. So I'll give y'all. Let's see. Okay, a variety of answers is good. All right. So some people, we'll go over a couple of things here. Some people thought it was easy. That's great. If you thought it was easy, then you are perhaps becoming well prepared to be a software developer. So that's great. If you thought it was easy, you are well on your way to being a software developer. That's great. I see a lot of this. It was fine, but I didn't feel prepared for the unit test question. So the unit test, of course, was something we went over in class. And that was the one that, at least on the few tests that I've peeked at so far, my TAs are grading these, but the ones that I've peeked at so far, the unit test one was the one that people seem to have the most trouble with. So duly noted. We'll try and go over that more before the final for sure. Some people have done beautiful art in their storyboards. I've seen some beauties myself there, so that's funny. I agree with that. So some people had to keep re-recording their videos to get them under 30 seconds and wasted a lot of time. And encourage you to try and, kind of master that for the final. We have to keep these videos short just for upload speed as well as for when they're being graded. So we have to do that. So that's something that you'll have to kind of learn to do. And I know it's not a software engineering skill, but it's just a life skill. You need to be able to record these quick demo videos. That's going to be relevant for filing bugs and other things that you do in software development. Again, I agree. I've seen this, that the unit test question was what people were less prepared for. And that's something that I will try and address in the second half of the class. We can go over that a bit more. So I'll try and address that more. However, I do agree with this person that if you did the study guide, you should have thought that this test was pretty fair and easy. If you could do all of the things on the study guide, then you could probably do very well on this test. So some people didn't have enough time to finish, and I want to make a quick comment on that. Sometimes if you haven't been actually working with the tools and you don't understand the tools quite, then you won't have enough time to finish. But if you have used these tools in your everyday work, like when you're committing code all the time, then it should be very easy to complete these things in time. So I try and make them things that are completable. Like I can complete them in probably about 3 or 4 minutes each. And I think the average person that's a developer can probably complete those things in like 5 to 6 minutes each. And y'all have 15 minutes each. So I try and give you enough time, but it's really all about practicing and making sure that you're doing this throughout the semester. So make sure you're committing regularly to your project, and the final will seem easier. Some people don't have artistic talent, but that's okay. It's okay. It's not about artistic talent. It's about communicating your ideas. Some people wanted like a grace period of like 10 minutes after the due time for uploading. That is an idea that I will probably implement on the final. So that is a good idea, and I will probably implement that on the final. All right, I'm at home today, as you might hear my kid coughing in the background. But I'm going to check this real quick. Yeah, so I'm just looking at the chats here. We will 30 to 35 seconds are all okay. No problem there. If you have 30 to 35 seconds videos, that's totally fine. Don't worry about that. For the final, it will probably be a very similar format where you'll have to do 4 things in about an hour. And you'll probably have to do a combination of uploading videos and pictures and stuff like that. So anyway, it'll be very similar for the final. All right. So thank you for your feedback on that. That helped me gauge what was okay, what was hard. I'll definitely look over these to make sure I didn't miss anything that y'all mentioned. But these are very helpful. Thank you. All right. Real quick, we're going to do a UML review. That's what we talked about last time. UML review. I want to ask you a question about this. Who can tell me one fact by looking at this UML diagram? Tell me something like in an English sentence about this system. So I'm going to be watching the chat here. Tell me something about that system that you're looking at right now in an English sentence. Just tell me something interesting about that particular that diagram communicates to you. Like if you were trying to explain that system to somebody, what is 1 or 2 sentences that you could use to describe something that's going on in there? Try and summarize. All right, somebody's saying it looks like a storefront program. Good. It looks like it's a shopping kind of program. Try and get more specific though, like, what is the user is a customer on a web application shopping? Yes, exactly. Tell me about some relationships between different things. Yep, it looks like an online store checkout system. Absolutely. These are great answers. Now, but let's try and get more. Like for instance, Cass is giving me what I'm looking for. The customer has an account. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for here. Accounts have order history with data for what is ordered. Exactly. You can create a shopping cart without having an account. That's another great piece of information. That shows me what I'm looking for is that you understand what you're looking at, and so that you can now say these kinds of sentences about it. That's great. All right. Y'all definitely get it. Thank you. Excellent. All right. Let's go back. So that one is great. Now I want y'all to tell me something about this diagram. Like, give me some info about this diagram. Like, where, just try and interpret it and tell me something interesting about this diagram. This is, of course, the other type of UML that is very popular. There is the first type, and this is the second type. I'm not going to tell you what they're called. That's up to you to figure that out. This is a different type of diagram, that's true. But tell me specifics. Tell me specifics about this particular software, though, that it's describing. Yep, pizza, they're ordering pizza. Yep, absolutely. Ordering pizza online, absolutely. How do you think that somebody at the store knows that pizza has been ordered? Can anybody guess? How do you think that somebody at the store, there we go, Cass knows that the database is updated. Do you think that any information about the store view of this system is shown in this diagram? Do you think anything related to the store view, like the worker view of the system, is shown in this diagram? Yeah, so the store has access to the database on another program. Yeah, the database is really the only thing that the store view would, like, that would probably be on this other view that is not shown here. That would be a whole nother diagram. So that's right. Okay, good. Y'all are getting it. Excellent. Okay, so that's just a quick review of UML. Who can tell me what type of diagram this is? Actually, before we go, what type of diagram this that we're looking at right now? What type of diagram? What would you call this? Who can tell me what type of diagram is this? In the chat. Y'all should definitely know what type of diagram this is. It's a type of UML diagram. It is UML. That's correct. This one is not a sequence diagram, but that is a type of diagram, so you're getting closer. What is this one? This one is a class diagram. Exactly. So this one is a class diagram, and what about this one? What type of diagram is this one? Second type. Yep. So this one is sequence. Exactly, Brandon. This one is sequence. And the other one, which shows us classes, is a class diagram. Class diagram and sequence diagram are two most popular UML diagrams that you will see used out in industry. So make sure that you're familiar with those. Like, let's say before the final, you should probably make sure that you know about those diagrams. All right. Let's go back. Today we're going to be talking about service-oriented architectures. It's just a particular architectural style that is important and kind of popular, and it's just one that you should know about. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it. It's not that complicated, but it's something that I want you to be aware of. Okay, so service-oriented architecture is essentially a way of organizing your system that makes it easy to recombine independent modules to offer many different types of apps without a lot of reprogramming. So you basically have a bunch of different services, and if you want to do anything, you use some subset of those services to make the larger thing happen. But you don't have to care or even know much about these individual services. Those take care of the details. You just have to access or interact with these services. Let me give you kind of an example of two different ways of organizing a bookstore application so you can see the difference. Okay, here's a bookstore application. You can see that there's like a reviews, a users, and an orders database. And if we were making kind of a monolithic or a regular application, these different subsystems might all talk to these different databases. And so you can see that like three different systems, the review subsystem, the user profile service, and the bind subsystem are all talking to the user's database. And these are all talking to the orders database. And you can imagine that maybe even the user profile service is talking to the orders and reviews and things like that. So everybody's talking to everybody, and it's kind of like one large system. You have to compile the whole system together. It's not modularized. The alternative, on the other hand, is you have these databases hidden within this, like each subsystem, and each subsystem is basically a service. So if you want to access reviews, the user reviews and editor reviews are all hidden within this service. you have to go through kind of the front door to do anything related to these reviews. Same thing with the user profile. If you want to do anything related to the user profile, you have to go in through the front door. If you want to know about that user's orders, you have to go through the orders front door. And so everybody's accessing these services through the same place. So it's kind of standardized. And if you wanted to create a new service, like a favorite book service, you could just access the user service and the review service and maybe create this favorite book service that you share to another system. All right. So just given that information about service-oriented architecture, I want y'all to think about and list all the modules that you think you could split your app into if it was going to be a service-oriented system. Now, I understand it might not be big enough to be a service-oriented system, but I want you to just do this exercise in your mind, and also on Menti, list the modules that you could split your app into. Go ahead and do that in Menti right now. Go. All right. So a couple people are getting these answers in. I'm going to come back to these in just 1 second because I want y'all to think about. I'll give you another couple seconds to get these in, actually. All right. I want to ask another question. Where do y'all think service-oriented architecture is most appropriate? Where do you think it would work best? If you're creating a phone app, if you're creating a calculator app, if you were programming the LinkedIn website, if you were creating Fortnite, if you were creating a Jamba Juice app, or if you were making Android Studio. All right, so I'm going to show you the right answer now. The right answer is LinkedIn. Something like LinkedIn is the most appropriate place to use service-oriented architecture. You can imagine LinkedIn has like the user profile service and the news feed service and the like the friends service and the update service, and there's all these different services that you interact with. You don't need to know about the other services that much if you're inside this service. They're kind of independent things. On contrary, and they're all like really big systems. Like, figuring out everything that should go in the news feed is a big system. Figuring out all the users is a big system. Figuring out the users as friends is a big system. Those should all be like separate subsystems. Alternatively, let's compare that with the phone app. The average phone app, there's not a lot of reasons to split that up into a bunch of different sub teams unless it's a really majorly huge app. It just doesn't make sense. You should just kind of have everything there together. Now, another one that's a little bit more fuzzy is Android Studio. You could potentially implement Android Studio as kind of a service-oriented architecture, because the IDE does provide a lot of services, but because it's all there on the same computer and you're not really dealing with like web traffic and stuff, it probably makes more sense just to use regular API. The reason, again, that LinkedIn works so well with service-oriented architecture is it's all, it's a website, so it's using services across the web. People are sending updates from everywhere, and things like that. So that kind of makes it more appropriate for that. Things like Fortnite, of course, aren't appropriate because the service-oriented architecture is probably going to be slightly less performant than other architectures, because while it's better organized, it's slightly less performant, and Fortnite or any gaming engine, needs to be really performant. So looking back at some of the answers that y'all gave, let me kind of update a few of them. Like, let's say if we were going to look at this one. So it has the create account, sign in, sign out functionality. I would group that all into, let's say, the like user authentication service. And then it has the create, delete list and update lists. I would group that into the like list management service. Okay, so in this particular example, you might have 2 different services, but just 2. Hopefully those examples kind of clear things up for you. Let me go in the chat, see. So somebody's asking, could SOA be appropriate for other choices here, though? I would say that SOA would be most appropriate for LinkedIn here. Not very appropriate for most of those other ones. Maybe for Android Studio, but that's it. All right. So what is SOA all about? We want to talk about it a little more closely. It is a networked kind of architecture. It's all about encapsulation, meaning like the data is hidden in each service. Each service provides a service contract that it will adhere to no matter what implementation is behind it. It will always behave in the same way to outsiders. The details of that service are hidden. You don't need to know anything about the details of how it works. You can compose all of these services together to provide something bigger. And there needs to be a discovery mechanism, which is more advanced, but it is just a way to figure out what services are available in your whole system. All right, so if you were going to implement a service-oriented architecture, there's 2 basic choices. There's RESTful, which is just basically, sending, like hitting a URL and getting back data kind of things. And then there's RESTless, and that can get a lot more complicated using WSDL and SOAP and messaging services and remote procedure calls and things like that. In general, you should probably always prefer like a RESTful architecture, unless you have good reason to go for the more complicated RESTless architecture. Now, REST is just the idea that we hit a URL and that triggers essentially an API and sends us back some information. It's usually stateless, or you have to give it some state such that it will return something to you that is more meaningful. And yeah, I mean, it's basically just hitting a URL and getting back the results. It's very straightforward way of implementing services, and it's it's pretty easy to work with. I would recommend it in most cases. Then there is the more complicated like WSDL and SOAP protocols built on top of XML for defining. So defining endpoints, WSDL define the endpoints, and SOAP helps transfer to and from that endpoint. We're not going to get into the details of those, but again, I would just recommend the RESTful approach if at all possible. Now let's look at, people are asking a little bit about what are some good examples of REST architecture. Well, Amazon, at some point, Bezos just said Amazon will now use service-oriented architecture. He said all teams will henceforth expose their data and functionality through service interfaces. Teams cannot kind of communicate through backdoors anymore. They have to communicate through these service interfaces. And that is how we're going to work at Amazon. So we're going to split all of our work into little services so that we can all work independently, but we're going to always expose the service model so that you can trigger these other people's services. It doesn't matter what you use as the backend. It just matters like how you access it in the front end, and so you can do whatever you want on the back end. And that is kind of how service architecture went down at Amazon. And for those of you that have followed the Amazon company, not only is it been a big success in terms of selling products online, but this whole AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, which is this whole infrastructure that people build most of the web on these days, or a lot of it, kind of came about because Amazon had this commitment to providing services over the web. They have a service-oriented architecture behind this whole idea of Amazon Web Services, and so it's been very successful for them. In fact, Google, on the other hand, another very successful, very big tech company, has kind of struggled to move in this direction. They really, to this date at least, haven't moved very far in this service-oriented direction. And so they don't have a service anywhere near as successful as AWS. On the other hand, Microsoft, I believe their Azure system is more of a web services type system, and so they've had some success there as well. Now, all of this is not a big surprise to those of us that have followed software engineering research, because we know the basics of software engineering research tells us that when we decompose things into modules, we usually have more success at creating complicated systems. There was a very famous paper by David Parnas back in the day called "On the Criteria to be Used in Decomposing Systems into Modules." It was just basically about modular programming, meaning that if you break down your huge systems into submodules, there are a lot of advantages. There's managerial advantages, there's product flexibility, there's understandability, there's composability. So it's no surprise. Sorry. No surprise to many of us that this service-based architecture is very effective at providing systems that are very flexible. Okay. Other research has shown that architecture does have an effect on how software evolves over time. So there's a lot of architecture, especially open source architecture, that is not quite so modularized, and that has a cost in terms of like defects and other problems. This is just kind of the other side of the same coin. So like we know that decomposing things into modules is very helpful in the long term, and we've studied after the fact. And when we see that some systems that don't follow these rules and don't modularize things, even when they kind of have a basic design that is supposed to modularize things, but that decays over time, that really costs us in terms of maintenance and things like that. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to end a little bit earlier today. So I wanted to make sure that y'all had time for any further questions that you might ask of me today. Otherwise, we'll be back with Coding Friday on Friday. So if you have questions, please ask them in Menti. As I mentioned, I'm at home today, so it's easier for me to answer questions on Menti than it is in the chat. But otherwise, you get to get out of class a few minutes early today, and I will see you on Friday. Okay. Somebody's asking, could you go over sequence UML versus diagram UML? So there's class diagrams and sequence diagrams in UML. Sequence diagrams are the ones that, let me show you exactly what they are real quick. Sequence diagrams look like this, where it's like the objects and then time is from top to bottom, and things happen over time. This object calls to this object calls to this object, this calls to this calls to this. So it's the actions that are happening. That's why it's called sequence. It's the actions of things. On the other hand, the class diagram is a static diagram, and it is just the structure. It's like, hey, the customer has an account. Customer has an account. That is the relationship between these two things. Nothing's happening. It's just the relationship, the static relationship between them. I hope that makes sense. Let me put back the question thing so you can ask questions again. Somebody's asking, when is the midterm grade posted? We'll probably post those either by the end of this week or early next week. You know, we get through those as fast as we can, but as you know, there is 100 of you, and there were 4 questions, which means there are 400 questions that we have to take a close look at, and so that takes some time. We are going as fast as we can. Yep. So hopefully within certainly by early next week at the latest. Somebody's asking, tabs or spaces? I don't care. I don't have a preference on this. It is, a lot of developers will fight about this, but I don't really care. Somebody's asking Pygame. I assume they're asking for Coding Friday. I haven't decided what we're doing on Coding Friday, whether we're doing Pygame or Xfig. We'll see. We'll see. I'll keep some mystery alive for Friday. Somebody's asking, is the midterm curved? Well, I don't know because we haven't finished grading it yet. It's unlikely to be curved, but I just don't know. Remember, you will get partial credit for answers where you, like, I've looked over a couple of them so far, and the ones that I looked at, there was nobody, like, there were no answers that would get zeros. So remember, there's partial credit. Somebody's asking, so not every program will need a sequence diagram, but everyone would need a class diagram. I mean, kind of. So a sequence diagram is meant to show the action of what is happening, but a class diagram is just a static view. So every program that does something can have both types of diagrams if you would like to draw them. Somebody's asking, are any extra credit options available? There will be extra credit options later in the semester for sure. So if you are interested in that, yes, there will be. Somebody's asking, TikTok's being graded with the exam. That's all together. So yeah, that is being graded at the same time as the exam. Somebody's asking, what is the penalty for it being late? We don't know the exact penalty for lateness yet. It really depends on the number of people that were late and how that affected what they were able to do and things like that. So I can't say until we've processed all the grades. So sorry about that. Somebody's telling me to make sure to hydrate. I will do. Definitely need to do that after all this coughing. Thank you. Good advice. Somebody said, I saw some lame TikTok, I assume, get 5K views. Does that count for an A? Well, if we can verify that it actually got 5K views and that they didn't buy 5K views, then it will count for an A. What is the next thing our team should be working on for our app? You should be working on version 0.2 for your app. That would be a great thing to start doing this week. Take it a little bit easy this week, be kind to yourself, but that's the next thing you should be working on is version 0.2 of your app, getting further along on the functionality. Somebody's asking, could we have a unit test thing for One Coding Friday? That is a really interesting idea. Maybe I will cook that up for this Friday. Let's see what time I have between now and Friday. But that is a great idea, and thank you for the suggestion. What is version 0.2 for our app? That is just a version that has more functionality than the original version. Remember, we're working in agile fashion. The first version has very basic functionality, but the second version, which you're going to show your customer next time, better have more functionality, or else your customer will think that you are not doing any work and will not want to pay you with grades. All right, and people are asking, will it be Replit or Xfig on Friday? I'm not sure quite yet which one I'm going to use. So I'm going to keep some mystery there. Sorry, I'm not sure which one I'm going to use yet. All right, I got to run. I hope you all have a great day. Take it easy.
Satisfy and illuminate the no's on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul embarks, then I'll follow you into the dark. And I'll follow you into the dark.